We're living in a time in a place where a lot of people around the entire world are a little bit uncomfortable and operating with potentially a sense of the grass is greener mentality. And we're seeing migrations exist all throughout the world. And I've been noticing it's interesting. I spent 3 months in East Africa last year and had a lot of conversations with people at all levels, from senior executives at multinational corporations to individuals and trade workers on the back of public buses as I was moving around. And there's this idea amongst certain portions of the population over there in East Africa that the American dream is still very much alive. And we're seeing that with how many people are trying to migrate. And then we're also seeing this narrative amongst people who live in these countries right now, in Western countries, I mean, who are believing that maybe the grass is greener somewhere else. And I know, I was born and raised in Canada, and a lot of my friends are starting to talk about, well, would life be better somewhere else? And it's sort of, I find it to be a bit ironic that we're, wherever you are in the world, people are trying to grasp at the idea that maybe it's going to be better if I go somewhere else. And the motivating factor there for a lot of people is hope. It's hope that it could be better if I was somewhere else or if I was doing something differently. And hope is one of the most powerful spiritual principles. It's one of the most powerful drivers that pushes people forward and keeps them going when things seem like maybe they just are completely unmanageable. And there's a survival rule. It's the rule of threes, and we say you can exist for 3 weeks without food, for 3 days without water, for 3 hours in harsh conditions, 3 minutes without air or oxygen, and some people say 3 seconds without hope, because that's just how powerful it is. And we see this, display when people have that lack of it. Really dire things can happen. And so we have to start examining, why are societies drifting towards this way where people are less hopeful about their own location, their own place. And there's a bunch of contributing, inputs to this type of thing. And one of them is this brilliant marketing plan that was the United States. That is the United States. And it's the American dream. The American dream, more than anything for individuals, sold the idea of hope. It sold the idea that you can come here, and it doesn't matter if you want to be a ballet dancer or an astrophysicist, your dreams can come true here. And that is an incredibly powerful stimulus to get people to do things. So as we look at these migrations, people are still holding on to this sense of hope, but there are other people that are losing it. And I think the reason people are losing hope, is because we're seeing the degradation of a few things. And one of those few things that I'm very adamant as a core pillar of our existence is community. And we're seeing the devolving or the dissolution of community all throughout the Western world and in many other parts of the world. The family unit isn't as strong as it used to be. The neighborhood isn't as strong as it used to be. Maybe the religion or the church isn't as strong as it used to be. And when you remove community, one of the things that you remove from humans is connection. And connection is so fundamental to our well-being. When you remove connection, you start leading towards loneliness or isolation. And then that can have a byproduct of loneliness and isolation, can create you to be prone to addiction or other mental health issues. So we've promoted the idea of individualism and haven't put the priority on the support system of community, simply because it's not easily monetizable. It's not easy to profit off of. The church, sure, they did it exceptionally well, but now you have this mass, generation that's kind of moving away from that, and it's not being replaced. And we're moving into apartments that you are more disconnected from your neighbor than perhaps if you grew up in a house and you went to your next door neighbor for a barbecue or to borrow a cup of sugar and all those, traditional cliches. And so you create this individualism that helps fuel this loneliness, which then manifests in these other behaviors that aren't super healthy or super popular. And it really slowly starts to extinguish that flame of hope. And when we look at where humans find their purpose in life, traditionally, you can look at it a number of different ways, but Traditionally, people found purpose through family. That was one of the most popular and widespread sources of purpose in a human being's life was family. One of the other ones was meaningful work. People doing something that they felt was good or valuable, and they felt proud about it, and they felt good contributing that to the world. One of the other things that we find value or purpose through is strength in the face of adversity. And so you have a generation as well now who the age of marriage and the age of birthing is now being pushed back and back further and further. And so they're not finding that purpose through family, which is the tightest rung of community is family. And then you go into neighborhoods and colleagues and expand beyond that. But the tightest ring of family or the tightest ring of community is family. So people aren't finding purpose and support through those systems. Then you move on to the other, sense of purpose, which is meaningful work. People aren't as proud and happy to be doing the work they're doing these days, especially in the Western world, because it's become very commoditized. It's become extraordinarily, obviously, profit orientated and shareholder driven. So people aren't going to work, coming home at the end of the day, feeling like I contributed something amazing to the world. There's not that sense of pride, especially within the Western world, because we've promoted ideals that aren't necessarily conducive to the well-being of the human experience, meaning we promote things like monetary wealth, which isn't anybody who's had wealth in their life is going to understand that isn't going to truly fulfill them. It will for a moment, but in terms of long term, it's not really going to do much. So when we bring this back to this idea of moving around to try to fix the problem, that sort of compounds it in some ways, because as you migrate throughout the world, one of the things you lose is that support system and that social network or family network. And now obviously, so that's why we put priority on immigration programs where it's easier for parents or relatives or siblings to come in after, because community is the first line of defense in social services. Beyond anything that the government is capable of doing, your first line of defense in social services is your community. And so the thesis of this entire topic or discussion is that we need to start prioritizing a sense of community at the small level and then starting to grow that to the larger level. And that's going to create more resourceful, strong, stable human beings through all the different metrics. And it's going to start removing this idea, there's so many people that need help these days in the Western world and abroad. And we come up with solutions like, and I'm not going to slander them because I think that they're potentially doing good work, but these online therapist apps. And when people are down and out, the last thing they have is $50 or $100 to pay to talk to somebody. They just really don't have that. When talking to someone in reality should be free. It should be part of how we build strong societal systems, right? And you think about it just like at the most, and depending on how, metaphysical you want to get about this, it's like cells are always trying to, connect with each other. And we're always, and humans are the same way. Like it's in our DNA to stay connected in some way. And so when we remove that connection, we lead to loneliness, we lead to other mental health issues, and that issue sort of compounds. And so then what you do is as people hold on to that last line of hope, maybe they've lost their community here, or they don't have as strong a sense of community, or they don't feel as connected to their work or to their job, they start coming up with ideas. And some of those ideas are, hey, maybe the grass is greener in another country. But the reality is, there's two realities. One is that there's 8 billion people in the world. We can't all just say, let's go to one country and that'll fix it. Like that doesn't solve the problem. I was reading a statistic the other day. I used to live in Nicaragua. I lived in Nicaragua for a year. Beautiful country. There's only 6.5 million people in Nicaragua. I've heard as many as 1 million people have left the country. And obviously there's a wide array of reasons for that. They went through a civil unrest in 2018 around protests related to some student issues. But it's a mentality that is not conducive to building strong, stable societies and economies all over the world. So bringing it back to a place where people need to find hope that things are going to be okay, things can get better, and that things can be okay here, and understanding that we have the ability to help influence that prosperity, and it's not always going to be for the purposes of monetary gain. Sometimes it's just for the purposes of improving our general well-being. So I encourage people to just pick up the phone, just reach out and talk to people just on a real level about family, employment, or just like how they're feeling, how they're doing, what they're thinking. Because even sometimes like people just don't have an outlet. Just to, the greatest outlet a lot of people have to speak is in the shower when no one's listening. And sometimes just having that soundboard can go so far. So hope is the most important thing that can inspire and drive a demographic, a population, a society, a culture. And as people lose that hope, they're grasping at ideas and things that just aren't super great. But we have the ability anywhere in the world to really build solid foundations, but it takes strong individuals to start leading the development of those communities. And you see, I think community is more orientated still in lots of the developing world. Like the family unit is a lot stronger in certain parts of the world. Like it's not a concept in a lot of countries to put your parents in a retirement home. That's a very Western idea. So the Western idea of like, if you have a problem, you talk to a therapist, not a friend. I mean, a lot of people, they maybe have, go to your uncle, go to your grandparent, go to your, find a mentor, things like that. And these relationships take time to build. We have this other expectation in the Western world of just like instant gratification. We expect results immediately. I want the stock to go up. I want the food to I want my garden to grow. I want whatever. And these relationships take time to develop, and it takes time to build that strength and unity between people that really creates that like profound depth relationship that can lead to these benefits. And so it takes consistency. Now you can fast track a relationship by putting yourself under an extreme scenario or extreme pressure. Like maybe you go through some life-changing traveling experience with somebody and you only spent 2 months together, but it was such a profound 2 months that like you create a lifelong bond over that experience. Those moments can happen, but more often than not, it's developing familiarity over time that then leads to these relationships blossoming and growing a little bit more. So, there's so many issues around the world today. There's an infinite laundry list of things that we could discuss that need to be considered, talked about, thought about. But I think the first line of defense, as I said, towards social services and social support is the community. And we need to focus on redeveloping communities from both like the smallest level, whether or not it's just a family unit or, you don't necessarily need to have a family to find purpose. Like it could be that you just have, 6 to 8 people around you that you are really, really comfortable getting super honest with and speaking with on a regular basis. And that'll just help build resilient human beings who can help navigate through these turbulent times, because it's not a question that we are in turbulent times. So I believe it's really, really needed. So to end the video, all I'm going to say is find 3 people in your phone, pick them up with no ulterior motive, no agenda, and just ask them how they're doing, have a conversation, continue building a relationship. Enjoy yourself.